friends, depending on where you are. I love being with you. I wish I could be at Pendle Hill. I always get such great energy there and the people who sojourn through there, but I'm actually in San Francisco right now. So that's why I said afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. And I am sitting in an office that happens to be right next to a band room. So if you hear tubas and drums and all those things, it is both a revelation and a practice that is happening here. I'm at San Francisco Friends School. And just to give you a flavor of how Quakerism moves in the world, this is a beautiful kindergarten through eighth grade Quaker school that is housed in a refurbished factory. It used to be a Levi's jeans factory, and the Levi's family gifted it so that the school could birth. So it's in the jeans, as they say around here.
Yeah.
And I am glad to be share this energy with you via Zoom. I offered today, in true Quaker fashion, not a lecture per se, and I laughed when Frances invited me. I think the subject of her email when she first said, "Can we talk?" was FML. And if you are anywhere in the text world and the and the LOLs and the IYKYK, right? FML means something totally different. I'm like, Francis, what happened? And every time the reminder would pop up on my calendar, it would say FML. So I am glad that this is not an FML moment in that way, but that I'm offering just a peek into my own life in a really good way and the ways the Spirit has moved me. And I offer it in hopes that in some piece of it you will connect with and be moved by as well. Before I do that, I'm so thankful to see some familiar friends' faces on here and some new friends. And I'm going to share my screen. I've got some slides to usher us through tonight. And I had to start with I hope you know about Friends Council on Education, but I want to make sure you know about Friends Council on Education if you don't, and just some fun facts about us and our organization. So first, we founded in 1931 as a consortium of schools. We are the National Association of Quaker Schools, and we therefore serve as the national voice on Quaker education in pre-K to 12th grades. There are university associations. Our work stays in that developmental snapshot from 3 years old to 18 years old. And there are 76 schools in our association. And we're all about their success. So the reason I'm in San Francisco right now is to do a 10-year accreditation visit for San Francisco Friends School and to hold up all the wonderful things that make them Quaker and to highlight some awesome opportunities for them to even deepen their Quaker practices. And we do that for each one of our schools. And in that way, we are setting a standard for Quaker worship, pedagogy, and decision making in a K-12 developmental snapshot setting. And what we are hoping as an organization, I know that Drew, April, Jennifer, Nick, and I, we try to model and educate about Quaker testimonies and practices in our own lives, in our own professional lives and personal lives, and to be a beacon of that for our schools. And so I'm thankful for this opportunity tonight to do just that. And you might be interested to know, as I mentioned, 76 schools. That's about 20,000 students in Quaker schools across the nation at the K-12 level. A lot of them in early childhood, as the one that I'm sitting in, with some pretty big pre-K to 12th grade schools as well, and 5 schools that focus specifically on students with learning differences, which if you know this generation, there's an increasing number of students with, I don't even know that I want to call them learning differences anymore because I'm not sure that they learn differently. I think they just compel us to teach differently. But just giving you a snapshot of our association. And with that, I launch into what I'm calling living testimony. And you'll hear tonight what I thought testimony was before I found Quakerism and what I know testimony is now, and how it moves differently when you're Southern Baptist versus Quaker. And so I play on that title as we look at that. And this picture, if you haven't seen the most recent version of the movie, The Color Purple, the musical that became a movie, that's the snapshot of Nettie and Celie from there, and it will ground our lecture tonight. So before that, because we're all in various places and it's somewhere near 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock, and I know we've had our days, I just like to make sure before I start things that people are paying attention. So I know you can't unmute. I'm going to ask you to do this in your own heads, but I want you to look at the picture and to name for yourself the first thing that you see when you look at that picture. What is in that picture? And I'll give you 10 seconds to just take a look at it. And then I'll tell you, you're seeing maybe a couple of things. I would name one of two things. You're seeing either an older woman or a younger woman, or maybe you're not seeing either of those things at all. But if you saw the older woman, you would see the hair that cascades down and the very pronounced chin and a very strong nose right there. And if you're seeing the younger woman, you're seeing a more delicate nose here with hair that falls behind the ear. Maybe if you're there, just raise your hand if you saw the older woman first. And raise your hand if you saw the younger woman first. Interesting, right? It's a cognitive psychology thing. We won't go fully into it, but who you saw first is also dictated by some aspects of your life and how you perceive the world, right? What you pay attention to, what you hook on to, how your brain decodes things. So it is a level of attention. I don't know if you saw the cat right up there at the top. It looks like a bonnet, but some people would say that's a cat. I don't know. I don't know if I fully believe it. I'm just telling you what was told to me. But the point being that if we pay attention, there might be more things to see than what's actually just on the screen. And so I give you this one. Now, once you know that, your brain will start to see those things much more quickly. So now you're seeing, I'll give you 10 seconds. You might be seeing either a saxophone player, if you paid attention to the figure that is colored in black, or perhaps you're seeing Taylor Swift if you see the picture that is marked in white, right? Both those things exist on that picture. And in this one, of course, it'll come much more quickly to you. You're seeing the gorilla and the lion sort of having a showdown by the tree. But do you see the fish? Raise your hand if you see the fish. I see some people leaning in. Do you believe that fish are there? Because I tell you, when I first did this, I did not see the fish, and I did not believe the fish were there. And someone had to come up to me and say, no, no, it's there. Let me point it out to you. And they're right here in the bottom. And if you look, the base of that tree then becomes the waves of the ocean and the fish jumping out of it. Now, I had done this exercise a good 15 times before I saw the fish. I would have done it 16, 17, 18, 19 times before I saw the fish. If that person hadn't stopped me and also stopped me from disbelieving the fish that she was seeing and gone up and pointed it right out to me, plain as day. And so I asked her a question. And I paused there because, Quakerism teaches us there's differences between a question and a query. This might live somewhere in the middle. It had an answer and it also was an invitation to a conversation. I asked her, how did your life lead you to see the fish? And my life led me to miss it all these times. And what she said to me was, I grew up in Bermuda. I fish every day. She said, the first thing I saw was the fish. I give you just that beautiful query because to me, there's nothing more spiritual than going around the world asking folks, how did your life lead you to see that, think that, do that, be that? And my life led me to not have that in my orbit at all until I found you. I just give you that as a start. And for me, that kind of is a start into my journey and my earliest understandings of faith in the unseen and faith in those things that are more complicated than you see on first pass. And so what you're seeing there is me. I am the older of the children in this one. This is my little brother. We are 13 years apart. And my mom and my dad and my grandfather, who's my father's father, you can see how much they resemble each other. And this is on high school graduation. And I show you this picture because for me, it is what we may call in Black history and in Black religions a mustard seed moment. It's a moment that was big and yet small at the same time. It's a moment that you only got there by faith. I start there tonight as I share my own testimony to my spiritual life by acknowledging that that picture, as beautiful as it is, it was a different era. I had hair then, but also I was not supposed to be standing at that graduation for many a reason. A kid born Black and gay in the ghettos of Baltimore was not supposed to go to Gilman School the way that I did, and to graduate cum laude from that school the way that I did, and to be on my way to Harvard the way that I was. That wasn't supposed to be my life anyway. That just wasn't the way the script was made for people like me. And I knew that at the time. I knew that I had done something extraordinary in every sense of the word, meaning out of the ordinary for people born in my circumstances. That on its own is a testimony, but even deeper than that, that I was there alive to see that moment is the even bigger piece of the mustard seed. I was born to a teenage mom in 1979. She came from a large family, one of nine siblings. They were poor, but they made it, as so many people do. And she fell in love with my father in high school. They grew up in the same neighborhood. He was friends with her brothers. The two families to this day are still one big family. They just grew up that way. But these two teenagers fell in love, and my mother became a teenage mother. And pregnant in her teenage years, in her senior year of high school, my mother was a woman of extreme promise at that time, and who has made very much good on that promise in different ways than she had imagined. At that time, she imagined that she was on her way to college, the youngest and the first of nine siblings who would make it that far. She believed in school so deeply. It's why I'm sitting in a school in this moment. It's why I went to school in kindergarten and never left, because my mother believed so deeply in education. She would say, and you know how parents tell you stuff and you don't know if it's true, but she would say that we grew up in Baltimore, if there was a snow day, that she would go to school anyway, because on the off chance that the news got it wrong and school was open, she wanted to be in the building. That was her place. Who knows if that's true or not, but the spirit of that I do know is true. She was a woman fiercely committed, she is, to education and believed in that for her children. But when she discovered she was pregnant, she would go to her oldest sibling and her oldest sister, who was the same person, my dear beloved aunt, and she would say, "Help me." And my aunt would say, "I will take you to the doctor and we will get this fixed." If you think about what fixed meant in 1979, then you know what my aunt was alluding to. And my mother would recoil and say, "That's not the help that I need. I feel blessed. I feel like I need to have this child. I feel like that's not what I thought my life was going to be, but now this is my purpose. I'm asking you to help me to raise this child into something that will be miraculous." Just in that moment, someone who lived into her choices and decided and chose me from the beginning. My life began with one of the deepest spiritual decisions my mother could make, which is, do I put all of my hopes and dreams not on hold, but into the life that's carried inside of me because I believe I am carrying a miracle? I am so thankful that she had a choice. Because I was chosen, I was deeply, deeply loved. I'm now an adoptive parent. I chose my kids. I was also born 3 months premature. Again, we're talking 1979. We're talking a Black impoverished family in 1979, and a child born 3 months premature. You could say I would fit in the palm of your hand. I was tiny, and I was struggling to breathe. And so they put me in an incubator for the first couple of weeks of life. And when you're like that, then you have to be touched on schedule if you're touched at all. You have to be touched delicately and fragilely and intentionally. That I lived my life closed off for the first couple of weeks of life is the reason why I live my life so big now, determined to get out of that incubator. I was not supposed to make it. This is now round two of not supposed to be here, but made it despite. My mother would take me home, and because I was born premature, I was also asthmatic and very sickly as a child. And so at 2 years old, I got pneumonia. Now we know pneumonia could kill a grown person, and it certainly could kill an infant. And that's what my doctor told my mother, that this would be the way my life would end, that I would not see my third birthday. We know the spirit number three. And my mother, in both shock and disbelief, and not the disbelief that comes from shock. I think she was in a deep, deep spiritual disbelief that this was happening. She persevered through teenage pregnancy. She persevered through premature birth. She persevered through impoverished Black neighborhood 1979 Baltimore. She had raised her child now for 2 years. She knew she was holding a miracle. She didn't believe that miracle was done. And so she would look at that doctor, and I remember her saying, a tall white man, and my mother, a small Black woman. Just the dichotomy of those two. And she would stand firm and stand on business. And if you know Carolyn Little, she stands firm and she stands on business all the time. And she said, you may have all these fancy degrees, but I'm not accepting what you've said to me. You're smart enough. You're the doctor. Your job is to heal. Tell me how to fix this. And again, that fix meant life lived grandly. And the doctor would say, it would be malpractice for me to tell you that your child would live. I cannot promise that. That is not my diagnosis. But you can make your kid comfortable. You can massage his back to break up the mucus that may land on his lungs. He ultimately will suffocate in his sleep, but you could make him comfortable until that moment. She picked me up. She looked at him and she said, thank you. I will do that. And I will also tell you, we didn't come this far to stop here. If you know Black spirituality, right, I just can't give up now. Nobody told me the road would be easy, but I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me. She looked at him and said, I will be back later with my child. This is a non-negotiable. She would tell me that when she took me home, she would massage my back as she was instructed by the doctor, but that every massage was a prayer. Not just that I would live in the physical. She desperately wanted that, but that my life would be lived in such a way that it would be lived big, it would be lived loud, it would go to the places that she did not go because she put stock in the miracle she was holding in her hands, now 3 times a miracle. And the kid who wasn't supposed to make it made it and lived a life as grand as she would have thought. And so my earliest understandings of faith in the unseen was a Black woman in 1979 in Baltimore, in many ways still teetering between kid and adult, who put everything that she had in this life. I'm sorry, I get a little emotional when I talk about my mom because she had a choice and she chose me. And that was a spiritual choosing. And then she healed me, and that was a spiritual healing. And then she anointed me, and my life is a testament to that. And so when I grew up, my spiritual heroes were Black people, my everyday Black family, and the icons that we looked up to, like a Sojourner Truth, talk about truth to power, talk about a spirit that moved the world, talk about someone who went with God. Harriet Tubman. I come from a descendant of slaves. My family traces itself back to Maryland and Virginia and North Carolina. We are descendants of slaves in this country. My grandfather, whom you see in this picture, would trace his lineage back to Scotland, right? Like we had all of the intricacies of a slave lineage in us. And then you see a figure like a Harriet Tubman, who didn't just escape slavery, miracle number one, but went back to bring others out, miracle number two, and did it multiple times, 300 folds. To me, that was what divine was. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whom I was taught about as soon as I could learn, I learned about the man who stood on the Bible and stood on business and changed the country by going across the bridge, despite the fire hose, despite the dogs, did not compel people to go. He went with the people. And he went knowing that his God was behind, beside, and in front of him. And therefore, I lived a life very differently than my mother lived because she grew up right in between segregation and integration. My grandmother says, she remember she had 9 kids. She would have to carry herself to a Black hospital, which was far from where, of course, where she lived to give birth to her children. But the realities were also very different. So I knew that about Black folks. I knew we were divine. I knew we were a people that were anointed. I knew we were chosen. And yet the Bible would tell me this. This is what divine looks like. That cognitive dissonance that I felt, I couldn't quite understand it. But as a kid growing up in a Black family, people tell you stuff, you don't question it. So I questioned it internally. Now they modernized Christ, right? In an attempt to make him more relatable, but I still didn't relate even to the modernized look. And I grew up in the South. I grew up in Maryland. Maryland doesn't like to claim the South, but it is. It is a slave state. It is just as far as you can go and still be in the South. And so one of my favorite breakfast things was grits. And in the morning, I would sit in front of the grits can, make my instant grits, and I would look at this Quaker Oats man. That's what we called him, the Quaker Oats man. And I knew he looked like these other religious figures. I grew up, of course, 1979, so the reruns of Little House on the Prairie was still on. I imagine that's what this man was about, right? That there was some sort of a white, we didn't have the word conservative then, and we didn't mean it in the political sense. We meant it just more in the living in a whole different way than I had lived. I lived an urban life. They lived a more rural life. I would look at that man and both love the bowl of grits in front of me and feel so disconnected. And yet, he, I knew, was the spiritual leader that people thought I should be following. As a young kid, I was both deeply religious and spiritually connected, and also questioning why the divine didn't look anything like me. I couldn't articulate that question, though. And we know in Quakerism, there are certain questions that you might can't articulate, but your body quakes from the inside with the opportunity to try to articulate it. And I tried and I tried, and it happened to come to me in a way you may not have expected, which is I loved, and to this day, I still love television. And one of the things I was blessed to live through was the era of a show called Good Times. I don't know if you watched it, but Good Times is one of my favorite TV shows. A family that didn't look that much different from mine, right? A black family in the ghettos of Chicago, just trying to make it with these kids who were just beautiful, brilliant kids, and also born of some extreme circumstances. And this family that just stayed together no matter what was going on. I would watch that religiously, and I would see myself in the character of Michael. If you watch Good Times, you know, Michael was the youngest one. And Michael was someone I aspired to be. He was all about school. He was all about challenging the norms. He wanted to go to Harvard and be a lawyer. I wanted to go to Harvard and be a lawyer. I eventually went to Harvard because Michael, on Good Times, said that's where we're going. But in the second episode of the show, something happened that shifted me completely. Surrounded as a kid by all these images of the divine that I didn't connect with even as I was a deeply spiritual kid. Michael came on that episode and validated a painting by JJ. So JJ is the older brother who's an artist, and he paints ghetto figures. He paints the people around him. And in this episode, he paints Jesus. And there's Michael proudly holding JJ's painting of Jesus. We call it Black Jesus. The mother goes ballistic. This is blasphemous. Take that down. I won't hang that on my walls. That's not what Jesus looks like. She had subscribed to the Jesus that is surrounding this picture. She had subscribed to the white Jesus, and she would not see it any other way. And the father would compel her, also, this is your son's art. So maybe we just hang it on the wall for a little bit. And as the episode goes, when they hung that black Jesus on the wall, which she did begrudgingly, the family started to get blessed in ways they hadn't been blessed before. Their fortunes actually changed. And at the end, she was like praising Black Jesus. But the irony is because remember that JJ is an artist who paints the people that he sees around him, that this Black Jesus, as controversial as it is just in its black skin, this was a real person that lived in their building, that lived in their neighborhood, who they called affectionately Ned the Wino. He was the neighborhood drunk that JJ turned into this religious figure and the image of Black Jesus. And everybody knew it. And in discussing it in the episode, they challenged the audience and themselves to see the divine even in Ned the Wino. Why couldn't Ned the Wino be a Black Jesus? Why couldn't he have the light in him also? Coming from where I come from, that was transformative for me because it said that everybody around me and all their complications and in all their failings and in all of their ailings, that they also had a piece of the divine worth hanging on the wall, worth praising, worth seeing as connected to the spiritual energy of the earth. I was still, and Michael and I were about the same age. So I was about as big or little, however you want to see it, as he is in this picture. And yet I sat there both laughing because it was one of my favorite shows and they are hilarious, but also crying from the inside about I had never seen myself as the possibility of the depiction of the divine until I saw that episode. I might have been 7 or 8 years old at that time, and I just tucked it away. I knew better than to hang a Black Jesus on the wall. That was not what we were doing in my household. But I hung Black Jesus in my heart for sure, as a reminder that in all my complications, I could also be a depiction of the divine. And as I got older, I also knew some different things about myself that made it more complicated. And I call it the identity molecule. I'll go through this part, but the theory is that just like chemistry has all of these elements out in the world that form and make substances that act and react in certain ways, and you know what they are, and they come off of this periodic table of elements, that we have social elements. And so baking soda acts a certain way, as does ammonia. They're made up of similar things, but they react very differently. And when you put them together, the reaction. We're like that as human beings. And this is our social table of elements. That you can pluck these things off that chart and put them together in a configuration that shows how you move, act, and react out in the world. Why are these four cultural? Because anywhere you go in the world, these eight things, so the theory goes, and I do believe it, are universally desired. People want to know and be known by them. The categories we have, the power structures behind them all change in space and time. But since human beings were communal, they communed around and built societies around these things. So then it would suggest that you could take these eight, and just like you take elements off that periodic table chemically, socially, you could build yourself as an identity molecule. And this is me. This is me, my social self, my social molecule, as I'm watching that episode of Good Times and connecting with the Black Jesus. Why then did it resonate with me? You're seeing in this molecule what is central to how I see the world and decode the world is race. Race was at the center of my being since I was a being. And so everything that I see through a lens of race. It doesn't always make me right? I think about if I live in a white neighborhood, I actually live in Olney, a little Quaker town in Maryland. And if I go to the supermarket and white people don't speak to me, I go, see, they're ignoring the black person in the supermarket. And if I go to the supermarket and white people speak to me, I say, see, they're going out of their way to speak to the black person at the supermarket. It's that I am just consumed by racial cognition, whether I'm right or not. But you see where that picture hit my molecule and reacted at my core. And you see how gender is very connected to that. Because there was always something with me about being a boy. Boys do this, boys do not do that. You are a boy. I was misgendered by the public at a very young age. I would go to the stores with my mom, and people would always mistake me for a girl. And I didn't have on any, well, I don't know how I would even depict girlish things. In my mind, I wasn't girlish in that way, but there was something about how I moved, and I would watch the way my mom would react to that, and that I knew something was off, and I could feel inside something was different. I didn't have the word gender non-conforming then. There was no gender fluid then. There was no non-binary then. There was just little black Rodney Glasgow being himself. I went to all boys schools as a kid. I think they sent me there in part to learn how to be a boy and learn how to be in the community of boys because my friends were all girls. And then I knew deep down that I was gay. But I was born in 79. I grew up in the 90s. We did not talk about those things, not in Baltimore, not in Black families. We did not discuss those things. And yet my molecule is reacting to that all the time, and it's just in there. And you see how that's connected to religion because I also was in an environment, and not my family. My family were not religious in the way that they hindered anybody's expression, right? Being gay was not an abomination in my family. We had gay friends. It just was something that I felt like I couldn't be because I paid attention to the small messages. But I knew that the Bible they gave me didn't understand gender nonconforming. I knew the Bible they gave me didn't understand gay. I knew the Bible they gave me said black was a curse. At least that's the way it was taught to me. And then my mother did something for me. This is now miracle number four, lifesaver number four, at least. There was probably many in between this. When I was 10 years old, she let me watch the movie The Color Purple with her. My mom and I love to watch movies together. I may have been too young to watch that movie, and yet it was just the right time because then on the screen was all this beautiful blackness and they were talking about the divine. And my 10-year-old self was trying to make sense of it and my molecules reacting to it, but I didn't quite get it. But when I was 15, she handed me the book, The Color Purple. I didn't realize the movie was built on a book. I didn't realize my mother had read the book. I didn't realize my mother, who, again, teenage mom in 1979, what did she know about raising a black, gay, gender nonconforming child? She didn't know anything about it, but she knew enough to say, take this book. I feel like it's going to speak to you. And when I opened that book, it opened a whole different chapter of my life. It's the cover of the book. And there's a scene in The Color Purple where the two women who are the protagonists are talking about God. And they're wrestling directly. They're saying the words out loud again. It's a Michael and Good Times moment of God is a white man and I, a black woman. What does that mean for me? And one woman turns to another and says, not for me. I've never believed God was a white man. I actually never believed you would find God specifically in a church with some even black man up in the front. That any God I ever found in church, I brought in there myself. That God is an extension of me, black woman, me. It was said so beautifully. I've got to just read to you that part in The Color Purple in case you hadn't seen the movie, hadn't read the book, or just hadn't connected with it in a while. And if you remember these two characters, Suge is this very embodied, very self-possessed, confident, talented black woman, and Celie is this meek, abused, sort of shadow of a person, and yet strong. She is the protagonist of the book, but she gets her energy from Suge. And as Celie, who is deeply, deeply devoted to the Bible, Shook turns to Celie in this moment of complication around God being white and us being black women. And Shook says, and of course, if you know the book, this is written in first person. Celie tells the story. So the I is Celie. Here's the thing, says Shook. The thing I believe, that God is inside you and inside everybody else. You come into the world with God. I got to pause on that because I think about my own birth. If I hadn't come into the world with God, I wouldn't have come into the world. But only them that search for it inside find it. And sometimes it just manifests itself even if you're not looking or don't know what you're looking for. It, I asked. Yeah, it. God ain't a he or a she, but a it. Now, y'all, when I heard that part, I'm like, now that seems a little blasphemous. I don't know that I want to dehumanize God. God was a he to me, but my mind now is racing about, but why did God have to be gendered? I already knew it shouldn't be racialized because it meant I wasn't divine. Why was I so self-involved that I would think that God had to be a man? And so Celia asked the question that I would have asked Shug, but what it would look like. And Shug said, and here's where it changed my life. It don't look like nothing. It ain't a picture show. It ain't something you can look at apart from anything else, including yourself. I believe God is everything, say Shug. Everything that is or was or ever will be. And when you can feel that and be happy to feel that, you found it. This is the God that got the enslaved people through the horrors of enslavement. This is the God that walked across the bridge with Dr. King and all the people behind him. This is the God that let a teenage girl in 1979 look at her older sister and say, when I say fix it, I mean fix it for life, not for death. This is the God. Sugar, beautiful something, let me tell you. She found a little lookout across the yard, leaned back in her chair, looked like a big rose. She said, my first step from the old white man was trees, then air, then birds, then other people. But one day, when I was sitting quiet, there's that still small voice, and feeling like a motherless child, which I was, it come to me. That feeling of being part of everything, not separate at all. I knew that if I cut a tree, my arm would bleed. I knew that if I cut a tree, my arm would bleed. No, I'm no environmentalist. I'm no big camper. I'm not out there in nature. Pendle Hill is about as rustic as I like to get. But when I saw that, like I felt it when I read that. I felt it because what it meant was I am not disconnected from anything happening, growing in this world. I grow with it, or I shrink with it. But that my humanity is tied up in everything else happening on this planet. It just made sense to me in a whole different way. And you kind of have to see some of the imagery of this. So I wanted to show you what that part in the movie looks like. It's not the same passage, it's related to that same conversation. And as you're hearing this, I want to talk about why this one is an image. You can just see from the beauty of it, but the words of it became almost like a gospel to me. I hope you can hear it. Let me know if you can't. But this is a clip from the original Color Purple movie, circa 1984. But more than anything, God loved admiration. You saying God is vain? No, not vain. Just wanting to share a good thing. I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in a field and don't notice it. You saying it just want to be loved like it's saying in the Bible? Yeah, see, everything want to be loved. Us sing and dance and holler, just trying to be loved. Look at them trees. Ever notice how trees do everything to get attention that we do? Except walk. That part, and she ends that with people think pleasing God is all God cares about, but any fool living in the world can see it always trying to please us back. That God, like everything else, just wants to be loved. When she got to that part about look at that tree, look at these flowers, look at this earth doing everything it can do to be seen, heard, felt, and loved. That was little Rodney Glasgow. That's 46-year-old Rodney Glasgow. That's a being who moved through life with so many marginalized identities and yet at the same time just said, love me anyway, love me despite, and more importantly, love me because. I live my life as a testimony to love because of this passage right there. Because I don't see love as separated from the divine. It actually is the divine purpose. And that someone like me could both give and receive love is so contrary to every message this country would try to send, especially now. There were pieces of the book that just leapt off the page and right into my heart. There's a moment at which Celia's abusive husband says to her as she's leaving, she's walking out now, she's got the courage. And he says, you'll be back. You'll be back. Shug could leave here because Shug has talent. She can sing. She could open her mouth to anybody but you. You're ugly. You can't cook. You don't make sense. You'll be back. And Celia turns to him and says, with all the power, I'm poor, I'm black, and I may even be ugly. But dear God, I'm here. When I watched her do that, it took me back to my birth. It took me back to this one will be here. And just being here is a divine purpose and a divine call, no matter what the circumstances are. Be here, be present. And while you're here, this is another quote from the book. We're here to wonder, to ask. And that in that wondering about the big things and asking about the big things, you learn about the little ones almost by accident. But you never know nothing more about the big things than you start out with. The more I wonder, the more I love. This is what made me live a life of inquiry, live a life of reflection, live a life asking questions, live a life wondering how'd you do that? Wondering how did your life lead you to see that when my life led me to see something totally different? Because that is my expression of the divine and my expression of love. And when you hear all of that, I then go back to Harriet Tubman, who's my ancestral icon. My house sits on the Underground Railroad, and my foyer is an homage to Harriet Tubman. When you come in, you'll see images of her. And what I didn't know about Harriet Tubman until recently, even though I've always felt very spiritually connected with her, was that she would say the way she found herself to freedom and back again and again and again and again was not because she knew the path physically so intimately, not because she was so precise in the way she moved geographically. All that is true. She would say, in the moments where it really mattered, in the moments that could have meant the difference between getting out or getting caught, I sat still and I listened for God to show me the way. And that took me all the way back to that little kid in that Quaker Oats box and understanding it differently, what that image stood for, the ability for anyone to see the divine, even little me, if I just sat and listened and let God speak to me and show me the way. And so my life now is a testament to what George Fox would have wanted, that my life and my conduct preaches among all sorts of people and to them, that I walk cheerfully all over the world, even Zooming from San Francisco on this fine day, answering that of God in each and every person, even and especially when it's difficult. And I call on us now to do that as a nation, because if we don't start doing that, we're in bigger trouble than it looks like we're in. And so I feel blessed to have found my spiritual self at a young age, to have found myself as a reflection of the divinity within me. Despite the messages I heard about Black, despite the messages that I heard about gay, despite the messages that I heard about gender nonconforming and queer, despite the messages that I heard about poor, that my life and my mother showed me that I was a reflection of the divine. And that because I was that reflection, the only thing I needed to do was sit still and reflect it back. Friends, that is the end of my testimony. And I open it up to reflections and questions and conversation from there. But you have heard my life as a testimony. Which the last thing I'll say is when I first heard Quaker testimonies, I still laugh when I say that word because growing up Southern Baptist, when we heard testimony, we thought about testifying. We were screaming and shouting and dancing the word. And what I appreciate about Quakerism is a testimony is not about what you say. It's not about the sermon. It's about the way you live your life. You should look at how I live my life and see the testimonies that are important to me. And I try to live up to that every day. So I pause there and give it to you, friends. Would love to just sit with you and say nothing and or sit with you and hear your thoughts and questions.
Rodney, thank you so much for the testimony of these words and of your life. It really is a gift to all of us. And I just am very, very grateful. I'm also noticing the time. I know you have another obligation after this. So I think maybe we have time for one or two questions. Do you have, no, did anyone here already have yeah, go ahead. We'll start here in the room and then maybe friends online. Maddie, can you explain how to write in the chat?
Yeah, folks can add their questions to the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll see what we have time for.
Great, go ahead.
I was curious how you got from the Quaker Oats box to real life Quakers. Can you tell us about that?
Go
I
ahead.
can tell you about that. Drew Smith is on the call. That's how I got, that's how I got to the real life Quakers. Between him and a woman named Tony Williamson, who at one point was the clerk of the board for Friends Council. And so my good friend Tony, her first job was at Carolina Friends School, and she and I went to graduate school together. And she would consider herself in some ways very close to a convinced Quaker. And she would bring me to her school to do events. And I learned under her, and she brought me to Friends Council to do events with them. And the way opens, I now work there. I live there now. So that's how. But I would say, because I grew up in Baltimore and I went to Gilman School, which is right across the street from Friends School of Baltimore. So as a kid, we did learn because we would do events together. We did learn the practice of Quaker meeting from them. They didn't explain it in a way that signaled anything divine. I didn't know it was religious. I just thought it was a way to have a meeting that I liked. So I was using Quaker practice in my facilitation for a long time before I knew exactly what it was. But those were my touch points into Quakerism.
Thank you. And I hope you're seeing all the hearts that are bubbling up on the screen.
I do. My heart is full. My camera zooms in automatically, so no, you can only see my big face. But I hand to my heart. My heart is full, and I do have a few minutes if folks want to ask anything else or say anything else.
Maddie, do you have anything online?
Yeah, I can highlight one person put in the chat. This is so beautiful in the middle of your talk. And Rebecca says, so powerful. As a fellow educator, I am wondering about the identity molecule and whether you have used that with students.
Oh my goodness, it's one of my favorite things to use with students. I've used it with fourth graders all the way up. I've used it with adults of all ages. It's just a wonderful entree into telling folks the stories, and kids can really get it because it's tactile. I've also had people using pipe cleaners and foam balls, like build their molecules in a physical way. And I'm also that person that at dinner parties, I might pour you a glass of wine, and two glasses later, we might do the molecule, and it comes out a little different. But definitely one that is used in my practice all the time, and people do enjoy it.
Any other questions here?
We have a few more online if there's none in the barn.
Yeah, go ahead, Maddie.
I can uplift. Susan says, wow, I too date my spirituality from Shug and Seeley. Okay, so some resonance there. Kelly says, powerful, thank you. How did you remain so positive during your times of difficulty?
Mm. I mean, that's the faith of a mustard seed. I feel like because I was born black and gay, thank God I was born black and gay, that I only had two options. I could wallow in a pit of despair, or I could find a way that generations of black folks did that allowed me to even live on the earth, which is to find a way out of no way and to find joy where there was not supposed to be joy, and that actually is our divine purpose. I liken it a lot to The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, one of my favorite Christmas stories. And you know, there's that moment where he thinks, if I just take all the things away from them, then they won't be able to have Christmas. And they'll just be in despair. They'll feel as miserable as I do. And he takes everything that they have, including the roast feast. And yet they still sing a beautiful Christmas song. To me, that is in my DNA. I come from a people who sang a beautiful song, even if someone took everything they had away. It's the only thing I know how to do. I actually don't know how not to do it.
Oh,
It's wonderful to hear that the root of your ministry is love. My question to you is, in a culture that is so inundated with fear,
Mm.
and a culture that profits off of fear, how do you present yourself in a way that people become more curious about love?
Mm.
What would you say? how would you invite them into the curiosity of love?
What I immediately thought about when you asked that question was I was doing an activity one time and you had to give yourself a more poetic name than you were born with that sums up your essence. And I gave myself the name He Who Walks Unafraid. So I love that you gave me that question about fear because I just learned not to have it. I have caution and sometimes I have precaution, but I have learned to live without fear. And it is because my life has taught me I don't have much to fear because there is something divine that is with me that will make sure that in the end I am okay. Even if I don't think I am okay, I am okay. Doesn't mean bad things won't happen to me, but there's nothing that would happen to me that I couldn't make it through. And then I think when you live life like that and you're not afraid of people, places, or things, then when you walk into a room, I can only tell you what I'm told, is that that level of freedom that comes from inside of me frees everybody in the room. And so I think about, I was for example, I was at the airport the other day and I love to impulse shop at the airport. But I was in a different terminal than I'm normally in. And I went into a store and there are two versions of this store. One in the terminal I'm normally in, and I was in this other one. And I walked in, and the woman lit up when she saw me. And she goes, do you shop at the other store? And I said, I have. And she says, I will never forget your face. And we just laughed and we talked. It was like we knew each other, and she had just seen me walking through the store. But there was something about the way I moved that liberated her and connected with her. And so I think for me, that's my answer is if you can release the deep-seated fear, because fear comes from this idea that something's going to happen to me and I'm not going to be okay. Something's going to happen to me that I can't handle. Somebody's going to do something to me that will be my ultimate demise. We all will get taken down at some point. The only thing that will take me down is my God. And so I need not fear anything else. So I can live as openly as I'd like to live because I am anointed.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Rodney. Do you want to take one more question from online, or are you feeling ready to?
I'm happy to take one more question if there is one.
Maddie, do you have anything else?
There's sort of I think mostly a comment. Bruce says, your mother's story is an allegory for our times. Her loving efforts kept you alive. Our loving efforts will keep democracy alive.
100%. Refusing to be told it's over. Refusing to be told you will dictate the outcome. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Any final words for us, Rodney?
I would say live your life as a testimony to whatever it is that's at the core of you. We know my life's testimony is to love. Yours is something different. But when you find out what that testimony is, your divine purpose is to live it and live it as loudly as you can.
Thank you so much I think I certainly needed to hear those words tonight, and I think many people will appreciate them both tonight and in the recording. I do want to continue to invite all of the friends here into ongoing learning with us. We're a small community here tonight, but next month we'll be back for our first Monday lecture. Welling Hall is our incoming artist in residence, and she'll be giving the March first Monday lecture, which will be the beginning of our spring term. So there will be 10 residents and students joining us here. I hope you'll join us for that.
What's the theme?
The theme is incredible, and it is escaping my mind in this very moment. It's about trauma healing and
reclaiming wrath?
no, it's above that.
No, okay.
Somebody will find it for me, but in the meantime, I will tell you, I saw Lauren Brownlee giving a heart earlier. She and Zenaida Peterson wrote an incredible mental health pamphlet called Patterns of Racial Wounding and Racial Justice in Quaker Communities. And they will be facilitating a reading group along with our pamphlets coordinator, Jonathan Spickard Keeler, on February 18th from 7 to 8:30. That's also online. So I hope that you can join us. There's a number of other announcements we'll send along in an email. Did you get the title for me?
Things of beauty.
Yes.
The intersection.
Thank you. It's for Welling Paul will be giving a lecture called Things of Beauty.
And the
Intersection of beauty, spirituality, and trauma. In the presentation, she will share her journey of becoming an artist through her witness against atrocity as both a spiritual and political act. She may answer the question, what is theopoetics? So many more opportunities to continue to learn together, friends, and we can close together with a moment of worship.